What's going on? Back again. In today's episode, I have a very interesting topic. I'll be sharing with you guys 10 plus lessons that we could learn training wise from Arnold. Now, this isn't a written law or anything. These are just things I've observed over the last couple years. And I've recently realized that a lot of what I've been preaching on this channel within the last year is a lot of the stuff that Arnold has been doing. And this actually became very apparent to me when I made a Q&A with Zach Couples and he brought up Arnold's name, and then we started talking a little bit, and we really realized that Arnold was up to something with a lot of his methods and training ideas. So he was definitely ahead of his time, and I'm really happy to share this information with you guys because Arnold knew what he was talking about. And even though I may be more influenced by more strongmen, it doesn't take away from the bodybuilders because everybody definitely has something to offer, and that's just that. So grab your popcorn, enjoy. So first things first, we can't talk about training lessons from Arnold before rewinding a bit and going back into his past. Arnold was actually a powerlifter before he was a bodybuilder, meaning that when he was around 19 years old, he already built a base, he already had a great total, and when he transitioned into bodybuilding, he already had a lot of muscle and strength to work with. And that's not to say that if you just go into bodybuilding right away with no base per se, it's actually a bad thing. But Arnold, that's just the way that he did it. And I actually met a couple strongman competitors who did something similar as well, where they actually went into powerlifting first before transitioning into strongman. So it's very interesting how a lot of people seem to be building their base through powerlifting and then they'll maybe branch off to something else. Secondly, and this relates back to the first tip, Arnold stuck to the basics. He didn't try to do any goofy exercises. He stuck to the deadlifts, the squats, the presses, the rows, the chins, the direct work, all that kind of good stuff, all the stuff that you're seeing today. So it's funny how 50 years, 60, 70 years pass by, whatever the case is, and people are still doing very similar workouts to Arnold. But with that being said, in today's episode, there were small tweaks that he made to his exercises that you guys could still very much. Thirdly, let's talk pull-ups. Arnold is a huge advocate of pull-ups. He did them all the time. He contributes a large amount of his back size to the pull-up. And if you notice the way he did it, he doesn't just cross his legs, arch his back, hyperextend his neck like a lot of people. He had his knees in front of his body. This keeps him more in a tuck position. And sometimes when the pull-up bar was high enough, he would actually have straight legs. If you guys are familiar, I recently made a video not too long talking about this, how you're in more of a stack position, you're using a lot less erectors, you could feel your lats more, but now you have the added benefit of incorporating your abs into the mix. And Arnold didn't only do this for pull-up variations, he also did it for dips as well. Fourthly, on the same topic of pull-ups, Arnold used to do something where he would get 50 reps in of a pull-up in the least amount of sets possible. And I think this is really cool to do for volume work because oftentimes for volume work, people will do 3 sets of 10 on a pull-up, and maybe on their heavier day, they'll do 3 sets of 5, 3x3, whatever the case is. But I actually like Arnold's idea better because you're getting a lot of volume and you're just getting in the least amount of sets possible. So maybe it takes you 7 sets to get to 50 reps, but a good goal eventually would be to get in, 3 sets or even 4 sets to get to 50. And then maybe over time, you could even start adding weight into the mix, pauses, whatever the case is. But just a nice program change you could have to get more volume in less time. So number 5 regarding Arnold's training is that he used to squat with heels elevated. And if you guys recall on this channel, I've been talking about using a ramp on your squats for maybe a couple months now, but it definitely does do a good job at keeping you more stacked, more aligned, and making your squats look a lot more elevator and less escalator. Shout out to Pat Davidson for that reference. But I personally like the way Arnold would squat. It looked a lot better when he would have the ramp, and there's actually photos online of him without the ramp and it didn't look as good. So he understood that he was able to use certain tools to put him into better positions from a biomechanics standpoint. To add on to the heel elevated tip, Arnold used to do a lot of his lower body exercises barefoot. And I find this very interesting because I've recently started diving more into barefoot training, and I'll give you guys quick updates on that later on in a couple of videos. But there are definitely a lot of benefits to lifting barefoot. It gives your feet a new reference to the ground. You're not wearing shoes all the time. It strengthens your feet. And there's tons of other benefits that I could explain to you guys later. But Arnold was aware of this. He would deadlift in it, he would squat in it. And you have some lifters who do their squats with Olympic weightlifting shoes, the heel elevation. Then you have other lifters who will just use regular shoes, but they might use a squat ramp. Then you got some people who might even use a squat ramp with weightlifting shoes. But Arnold, he went barefoot and he had a wooden ramp. So I found that very interesting. Talk about strict arm training. There is some footage of Arnold doing the cheat curls where he's really leaning back, but you do see a lot of his training where he does strict arm training, which I very much respect. And likewise on this channel, I've been talking about that for a while. And that's actually how I brought my arms up as well. I feel like when you cheat too much in your arm exercises, it could definitely work for some, but for somebody like me, I found that strict was the way to go because there's less chances of other muscles taking over. So Arnold would do a lot of his curls seated. He would do a lot of them on an incline. He would use the arm blaster for curls. He would also use the arm blaster for tricep pushdowns. For those of you who don't already know what the arm blaster is, it's a piece of equipment that wraps around your neck, and there's a metal object that kind of takes in the shape of your elbows, and you just curl in that fashion. Now, I personally just sold mine. I don't think it's really necessary. You could easily just put your elbows against a wall, or you could take your elbows, just put them against your obliques to make sure that they don't move. But needless to say, Arnold was big on strict arm training, and that's definitely another thing we can talk about. Delt training. Although I haven't seen much footage of Arnold doing the Arnold press, apparently he's the one who made it up, and it definitely is a great exercise for many reasons. One being that it increases the range of motion, helps you get way more out of less weight, and also a lot of people who are stuck in extension, when they do a barbell overhead press, they have to lean back even more. So it's just going to feed more into that. Whereas the Arnold press, it keeps you more stacked because you're going to keep the dumbbells here, and you could even do it in an alternating fashion where you don't have to hyperextend your lower back as much because the dumbbells go around the head as opposed to straight up. So it's a great exercise right there. You could do it alternating, you could do it 2 arms at a time, you could do it seated, you could even do it standing. And it's definitely a great tool to have for high reps. So number 9, let's talk about alternation and unilateral work. Arnold was a huge advocate of this, and he would incorporate a lot of unilateral lifts for the upper body, such as 1-arm overhead extensions. He would do alternating lifts such as curls, alternating delt raises. He would do alternating lunges, and the list goes on. And the reason why I like alternating lifts so much is because they have such great transference to the gait cycle. So if you want to move very well, you want to walk very well, it's in your best interest if you want a very mobile rib cage to do a lot of alternating lifts in your program. I'm not saying make everything alternating, but don't do everything bilateral either. And if you want a great webinar regarding this, check out Weight Room Training is Gait Training by my coach Connor Harris. There's part 1 and 2. I'd highly recommend you check it out. And on the topic of unilateral training, Arnold was a huge advocate of one of my favorite tricep lifts that I keep forgetting about and I keep adding back in, known as the 1-arm overhead extension. I've done overhead extensions for years. You guys know already I've been talking about the tricep long head, one of my favorite muscle groups, but I never really liked the 2-arm variation. I found that it kind of felt like a behind the neck press, and it just never felt really natural, especially as the dumbbell would get bigger. But he was a big advocate of the single arm variation, and everybody I talk to who has big arms, they're all a huge advocate of this lift. Whoever has big triceps in the comment section below, you know you've done this lift in the past and got great results from it. The weighted stretch, it gives you one that you can never get from a close grip bench, a dip, or a skull crusher. So if you could get really strong at the 1-arm overhead extension, your triceps will definitely get more jacked. 10, let's talk about benching with the feet elevated. You guys know I posted a video a couple months ago talking about the benefits of benching with your feet on the bench, or even benching with the floor elevated. So you could put cinder blocks on the ground. This keeps you in a more stacked, more of a tuck position where you can't arch as much. So basically, instead of lowering the bench, we just bring the floor higher to you. And this doesn't have to apply to everybody. If you're in a powerlifting competition, you don't have to bench like this all the time because obviously you don't have that luxury when you're on the platform. But for variability in your training, you could still add in some feet elevated benching. You could still have some floor presses. And Arnold did exactly this. When he was doing his incline benches at Muscle Beach, he had his feet elevated on a box. When he was doing some dumbbell benches, he would put his feet on the bench. Or when he was doing his skull crushers, he would put his feet in the air. Whether that was the reason he was doing it or not, this keeps you in a more stacked position, helps you get more range of motion, and it just limits the amount of muscles that could help contribute to the lift. So there's less erectors in the exercise, it's more chest, you're just getting more out of less weight. And that's another thing too. Arnold was not a huge archer. If you look at when he was benching, he wouldn't use this massive arch. And who knows, maybe that contributed somewhat to his chest development because the bar now had to travel a further distance. Number 11, let's talk about rows. A lot of people would cringe or roll their eyes when they would see Arnold doing his cable rows, not knowing that there was a method to his madness. He was reaching on the rows because this actually engaged the serratus anterior, which is an essential muscle for shoulder health. Also, it gave him a better stretch in the lats, and he wasn't rounding his lower back either. He was simply rounding the upper and mid back, gave him a great stretch, and this is just another way you could do your rows. You don't have to lie back and hyperextend the whole time. There's nothing wrong with reaching on the rows. In fact, I actually recommend it not just for cable rows, but for dumbbell rows, and other forms. Let's talk about
as well.
intensity techniques. I recently just made a video on how to take your arms to the next level with mechanical drop sets. And Arnold didn't necessarily mention this in his encyclopedia, but he was talking about rest pause, drop sets, supersets, especially for muscle groups like the arms, because he wanted to take them to absolute failure. And who knows, maybe that contributed to some of his growth because he would train his arms extra hard. So for example, he'd probably do some alternating curls, maybe use 40, 50-pound dumbbells. Then he would do a drop set and he would just milk the gains even more. He would just continuously make the set last longer and longer. And that definitely will spark some growth, at least for most. Another thing I'll just throw in is that Arnold was a huge advocate of training outdoors. You'd see him at Muscle Beach. He'd be giving off of good vibes, smiling at people, flexing, taking pictures, just keeping things fun. And a lot of lifters out there, they mean mug people when they walk in the gym. They're just always in this angry, negative vibe. And I don't feel like Arnold was really about that. He was all about the positivity, and he did a lot of great things for the fitness world. So these are personally some things that I've learned regarding Arnold on a training level. I'm not talking about his whole career regarding movies and stuff, strictly training that I personally observed and that I personally have in common with him if you guys have been watching my videos in the last couple of months. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What did you learn from this video that you didn't know about the styles of training that Arnold was doing? Let me know in the comment section below. See you guys next time.